be lucky if he's 180. So I drew dedicated hunter. Do you know what the dedicated hunter is? Tag. Too many people want people knowing about it, but I'm all about getting more people involved in hunting. So it allows you to hunt 3 years, fill two tags. You have to do community service hours.
This perfectly. I'm like, whose kid is this? Like,
How's it going, everybody? Today I have Daniel Bishop on the podcast. So he has an awesome channel. He'll tell you about it, but we want to do a tip of the day. So welcome back to the fourth podcast of Bows, Bros, and Bucks. So the first tip of the day today is just south-facing slopes for those sheds. When you're going out on the winter ranges, just make sure to check under junipers, different thickets, and just keep hiking, honestly. Just cover as much ground as you can on those south-facing slopes where those deer are bedding. Now we'll turn the time over to Dan.
Hey, how's it going, Kyle?
Good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. So yeah, that was a great tip. Man, did you hear about what's going on in Utah with the shed closure?
I have. I've been talking to some people on the podcast about it. It's pretty crazy. What do you think about it?
Oh man, that's a tough one, man. I get where they're coming from. Like they like we obviously have to do something for these animals, and like I think it's good. It's a good first step, I guess. It sucks that they're able to have that kind of control, but it's a good first step. But in reality, if they're going to use the excuse of, oh, we have to do something for these animals, winter is hard, then why are they having that late cow tag, that it runs through January? It's like, well, if you really do care about the animals, maybe you guys should stop trying to get your money from all these extra tags and then pull back that hunt instead of just shed hunting. Because, I mean, most shed hunters, I would say, most people are good, just like with any job, whether you're in law enforcement or a firefighter or a teacher or whatever. Like, you're going to have your people that are jerks and don't care about following the rules the best way, but most people are good. And I think that most shed hunters are respectful of the animals and they sit back and glass and they wait for them to drop and then they get in there, scoop them up and leave. But then you have guys uh what are those snowmobiles and stuff. So
Snow
that
machines
are
just going around back and forth grid searching when they're just crap shooting around. Yeah.
yeah. So those are the guys that give it a bad name. And so I see what they're doing. It's a good first step. And it's hard to say if I agree or don't agree because I mean I guess I do agree. It makes sense. It's going to be rough because not everybody follows rules. I was talking to a guy that said last time they did this, I think they did it in 2017 or 18 or something a few years ago. And when he went out there, he didn't. All he found was boot tracks, no sheds. So it sucks. But
Yeah. Martin said from his videos, he was like, it just hurts the people that are ethical. Like it doesn't
yeah,
hurt the poachers because they're doing it either way. So
exactly.
I think it's interesting. One of the things that I learned from his that I talked about on the other podcast was I didn't realize that they're not closing it to general public, like just shed
Yeah,
hunters, which I'm like,
yeah,
what? That makes absolutely no sense. So
yeah.
I thought that was interesting. But getting back to who you are, do you want to tell everybody where you're located and just kind of what got you into hunting, just as a baseline?
Yeah. So I live in a small town called Beaver. It's located in Utah. It's about an hour and a half from St. George, which is the very southern border of Utah. And what got me into hunting is so I grew up in New Mexico, around Las Cruces, New Mexico, and my dad, he was always hunting, like not all the time, but like he tried to have a deer tag every year, and he was really into coyote calling. And then so I grew up from like the age of 4 doing a lot of predator calling with my dad. That was our thing. And then I got my hunter safety, and I got my first tag. So I was homeschooled until ninth grade, and then when I went to high school my dad, like it's funny, the older I got, the kind of less hunting my dad did because we didn't make a lot of money as a family. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a roofer. And so he got to the point where he was like, man, hunting's just becoming a rich man's game because, I mean, really it is like whenever you get into it, buying your tag, all the gas money you spend going out, especially for scouting, you have to have your ammo. I mean, it's not cheap. So towards the time where I was getting really interested and old enough to start hunting, my dad's like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't get a tag, or it's a rich man's game, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not sure how it happened. I don't know if my mom talked him into it or if I talked him into it. I don't remember, but I ended up going to high school after being homeschooled because my mom couldn't teach me math anymore. So I went to high school, and my dad was like, "Hey, son, let's go get some tags. Let's go get some deer tags." And so we got it was a 5-day hunt, and we had a rifle tag for mule deer down in the desert in New Mexico. And we lived out in the middle of nowhere, like 40 minutes from a town, very isolated, but we had a ton of BLM land out behind our property, just desert for miles and miles and miles. And then there were a couple ranches out there that neighbored each other. And I grew up working cows on a ranch. He was about a mile away from us, our neighbor, and he had a pretty good. I'm not sure how many sections of land he had, but he had a pretty good chunk of property out there. And so we got written permission from him to go hunt, and it was a
Is it
5-day
just
hunt.
like just sagebrush, basically, just wide open
Yeah,
desert?
well, it's not like flat, wide open desert. There was a lot of rolling, like sand hills type
Okay.
things with a lot of creosote brush, and
Okay.
there really wasn't too much sagebrush out there. I mean, it was a lot of creosote. It's pretty desolate, man. A lot of creosote and cactus
Yeah, New
and
Mexico is
rock.
interesting like that. It's funny how something a bordering state can be so different for the wildlife.
I know. And New Mexico, yeah, it does have its beautiful like the Gila and like the prettier places where it's mountain, but a lot of it's just desert, man. But yeah, so that's that hunt. We took our horses out there about 5 miles, 6 miles back, hobbled them up, and started walking around some draws. And my dad got a buck opening morning, and then sorry if you can hear my baby crying. My wife's taking care of the baby. She's just over eight
Totally
months
fine.
old. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Ranley. And so, anyways, it was a 5-day hunt. So he got his opening morning, and we hunted for 4 more days. And I shot at one buck. I think it was a buck I ended up killing. I shot at a buck on the third day. And when you're shooting at a buck on a hill, like you would think you would have to like aim above him for the bullet to drop, but because of the elevation, you have to aim a
Yeah,
little lower. And I
exactly.
didn't. Yeah, my dad never explained that to me, so I was like aiming super high, and just the deer's just looking at us like, what is this guy doing? So I missed, and that was an adrenaline rush. And I was like, man, this is what deer hunting's all about. I see why my dad does this. So then finally, the 5th day, we go back to the exact same spot where my dad had shot his buck. And then there that buck was that I had missed. And so we hobbled our horses, and we just did a spot and stalk type thing. So my dad would watch him while I crawled on my hands and knees for about, I don't know, 50 yards. And then I would watch him, and then my dad would catch up to me. So we did this for quite a while, and we ended up losing him. And he went over this ridge, and we got up to the top of this ridge just crawling. And he was like 150 yards bedded down, just going like this, just trying to stay awake. And so we waited for him to stand, and I got my shot off. I shot twice, and he stood up. My dad's like, "Okay, shoot him, son." So I shoot, and he just stands there, and I'm like, what's going on? My dad's like, "Did you hit him?" I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "Shoot again." So I shoot again, and he kind of moves a little bit, and he starts walking down the hill. And my dad's like, "Okay, there's blood coming out. He's shot," but he was just so dazed, he didn't know what hit him.
Yeah.
He ended up killing over. But from that moment on, man, I was like, man, this is hunting's where it's at. But
Once you
that's
get that
that's really
that
what got
buck
me.
fever, start
Yeah.
shaking a little bit.
Oh yeah, it was
There's nothing
exciting.
like it. Is your phone up and down?
It is. Should I turn it sideways?
Yeah, if you could, that'd be awesome. It would
Oh,
just, oh
oh, dude,
man,
so
that's
much
way
better.
better. Okay, sick.
Yeah.
And that makes that
Uh,
buck look 100 times bigger. So
oh
that'll
yeah.
help.
Sweet.
Yeah, it'll
All
just
right.
be easier for editing that I don't have to like crop you in or anything. But
All right. Sorry,
that's an
dude.
awesome, no, you're totally good. That's an awesome buck behind you. Is that the one from this year?
Yeah, that's the one I shot this year. Want to check them out?
Yeah, let's see it. Give us the recap, story, score. I don't know if you scored here, but let's
We
hear.
did. When we found him in the velvet, I was thinking like 186. My buddy's like, "Oh, dude, he's 195 all day." But once he rubbed his velvet off, we were like, "Oh, okay, he's definitely not 90s. We'll be lucky if he's 180." But so this buck, man, me and my son. So I drew dedicated hunter. Do you know what the dedicated hunter is?
I
Tag.
don't.
So out here in Utah, I don't know if too many people want people knowing about it, but I'm all about getting more people involved in hunting. So the dedicated hunter tag, it allows you to hunt 3 years and fill 2 tags. So you have to do community service hours. So I think you have to do, it's like 36 or 40. I think it's like 36 hours of community service hours, or you have to buy your points. So they're $20 a point. So it's like $600 in total, I think. And so um, the first year you have to have 8 hours complete and you get your tag. So I bought my first 8 hours because I just did not have time to do community service hours and stuff. So I bought my points and that gave me my tag and I was able to get my buck last year, my target buck. That was actually a pretty cool story too. Got him. And then this next year I was like, okay, well, I have this year or next year. So I can be patient. I don't have to shoot the first thing I see. And so me and my son go out scouting. There's actually a YouTube video on it. The first day we go out.
Is that a specific unit you get with the tag, or is it just
I think
a general over the counter?
It's so you can get your general over the counter tag, and then this you go online and you purchase it. You have to do an ethics course, I think, or some kind of a course to get like to be able to draw the dedicated hunter tag. Man, my baby is. Can you hear my baby screaming?
Barely. You're good.
Yeah. She must be nap time or something. But yeah, so you have to get that course done, and then you have to draw. So it's like you can't just buy over the counter. It takes. I think I got mine on my third year putting in for it. So you can typically draw 2 to 3 years, and then what's cool about it is you can hunt for 3 years if you really wanted to in a row. But like I said, so me and my son went out there, and I was gonna take my time, be patient. I wanted to look around for look through quite a few deer. And that first morning we went out there, I think we found 13 bucks, and it was in a spot I'd never been. It was in a totally different spot than where I shot my buck the year before, because I just wanted to I just wanted to see new ground, you know.
For sure.
And I'm like, holy cow, Asher, we just stumbled upon 14, 13 bucks. And there was 2, and it was pretty early, so they were still growing. I think it was like June still, it wasn't even July, so it's pretty early. And it was kind of hard to tell what they were going to be. So I was like, well, there's 2 bucks in here that I definitely want to come back and check. So a few weeks go by and I go back out there, and we could see that the 2 bucks that I was thinking, they were going to be pretty good bucks. And my goal for this year was just to do better than the year I did before. You know, I think the buck I shot last year, he was like 165, but we called him wide load because the year before I shot him, he was just super wide and just had like a little tripod on the front of his main beam and just super unique. And so this year I was like, I want to do better than that. And so when I seen the buck right here, we called him Tank because that's what my son and my wife kept calling him. We were like, all right, that's going to be the buck I'm going to go after. I'm putting all my eggs in one basket because I was like, should I go out and look for something better, or should I just be happy with what I have and not take it for granted? You know, I'm like, I'm not going to leave this spot. So I stuck on him. Like, dude, I was out there so much because it was about an hour drive from where I live. And where I work graveyards. I work 12-hour shifts, 3 on, 3 off, 2 on, 2 off.
What do you do for work?
So I'm a correctional officer at the local jail.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah. So I do that. And then I'm on the SWAT team for our county. And then I have a small side business on the side that I started.
Awesome.
Which is, cleaning windows. So I stay pretty busy. So I have a pretty busy schedule and trying to balance that with hunting and family and everything. But luckily, this was an hour away. So I could get off work in the morning at 6, head out there, get there in time to glass for like 30 minutes to an hour, and then head home, sleep, and then wake up, go back to work. And then during day shifts, I would just, I think I actually ended up trading somebody for like 2 months because I actually, hey, would you do my day shift for 2 months and I'll do your night shift? So my job's pretty good about vacation time and being able to switch shifts as long as they're covered and giving a heads up and stuff. Yeah. So I was able to do that. And I think I was out there I think during the archery hunt, I only missed 2 days, maybe 4 days. I was sick for 2. And then we went on a little camping trip for 2. And then I didn't miss any muzzleloader and I didn't miss any rifle. And then between the hunts, I was out there still trying to keep an eye on him. So it was tough. He was living within like a pretty much like a mile radius. And if he wasn't here at this spot, then I would haul back to the truck, drive down the road, and then get out and get to this glassing spot. If he wasn't there, then more than likely he was going to be at the next spot. So it was a lot of just, if he's not here, move to the next.
Were they just like small valleys and ditches where he was just bedding with other deer and just happened to switch per day? Or was it one big valley that there was multiple like different saddles that he was sitting in?
So it was like a big valley. And I'm sorry, you're lagging a little bit. I didn't cut you off, did I?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, it was pretty much a big valley, but it's like one of those things where a lot of people would just pull up in glass and boom, nothing here, they move on. But what you need to do is you need to get there and you have to glass, and then you'd even have to like walk a little bit because there's a lot of like little ditches that you don't even know are there, because to the naked eye it looks like it's just flat and keeps going, but whenever you start walking through it and getting different angles, it totally changes. And like there was one day I went out there during the muzzleloader hunt. I think it was the last day of the muzzleloader hunt, and I'm like, man, I can't find him. I haven't seen him for like 3 days. And I was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna walk up in here and see what's going on. Maybe I'll bump him out of his bed or something. And I get to the spot and I look down in this ditch that's not even a real big ditch, and there was like 8 bucks in the bottom of this ditch feeding. And I'm like, holy cow! I had no idea they were there, and I glassed it all morning.
Dang.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome though. Did you get him with the rifle or the bow?
I
Or
ended up getting it with my rifle. So that dedicated hunter tag. So you get to hunt 2 years, or you get to hunt 3 years and fill 2 tags out of the three. So with a dedicated hunter, also you get to hunt archery, muzzleloader, and rifle. So I was out there with my bow, and I had 9 stalks, 9 actual stalks, where I was like, there he is. I'm getting in close to get a shot. So I had 9 actual stalks and probably seen him like a total of 4 different times where he was already going to the thick timber where I couldn't get an opportunity. So archery was tough because this area, it's not like you're up in the high country. It's not where you can find them, bed them, and then put a play on them. It's like you find them feeding and you have to cut them off or set up where you think they're going to go. And so there's opening morning, I think I did 2 miles. I went to this spot and I had my buddy way up about a half mile away glassing, and he hit me up on the radio because you can use radios in Utah. He's like, hey, dude, this buck's over here. I got him. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm already on the other side of this area. So I had to start jogging all the way through this area to get back to where he was. And I think I did about, at the end of the day, I probably did about 2 miles just from just jogging back to where I had to go to try to find him.
wow.
So, yeah, so that was archery. And then there was like a week break between archery and muzzleloader, and I was out there on my days off trying to relocate him and get because I knew he was there. I just didn't know his pattern, and I was just, the more I was out there, the more information I was gathering. And I finally found him in the muzzleloader. Oh man, when was it? I found him the 2 days before muzzleloader started, and he was down like really low. And I'm like, oh, this is me money. With a muzzleloader, I can definitely get within 200 yards. This is going to be easy. And then I go back out there and I can't find him. Then I go back out there on the opening day, can't find him. And I go back out there the next day, I can't find him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where the heck
Disappeared
did
on
he
you.
go? Just disappeared. And all he was doing was, I think he was just going to bed earlier before the other deer. Because as later, he used to stay out pretty early, or like pretty late. Like in the morning, he would stay out with everybody else. But as time got on and he got hard horned, he just started doing what old bucks do, going to bed before everybody else.
Yep.
And then at night, when he would come out at night, he would wait till it was dark. Like I kept seeing these other bucks. I'm like, where the heck is Tank? But and he started thinking like, did somebody else shoot him or what? But he ended up just coming out later at night. And so I finally found him during the muzzleloader hunt. And dude, like if anybody's watching this or whoever's watching this, you guys got to watch the video, because I finally find him on the muzzleloader hunt, and I'm getting ready to shoot him, and I put my finger on the hammer to pull back, and this ranger drives down the road, and the deer, and they take off, and I'm like, oh
No.
my gosh, like this finally works out perfect, and another human messes it up, which that's public land.
Uh-huh.
And then 2 days later, I find him again during the muzzleloader, and it was the second to last day, I think. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's like, I got out of my truck and I started walking, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's like he was probably like 150 yards off the main road, just down low. And I'm like, holy cow, he's like right here. And I'm getting down on my hands and knees trying to crawl because he's just out in the open and I'm just out in the open. And I'm crawling on my hands and knees, getting closer to him, and they don't even know I'm there. They're all broadside, him and the other 2 bucks that were there with him. And I'm trying to get my spotting scope set up sideways so I can use it as a rest, right? And then I hear something on the road, a truck, and then they slam on their brakes because they see me and the deer. And I'm like, crap. And so the deer are starting to take off. And I'm like, well, it's now or never. So before they took off, I ended up shooting, and I must have shot over his back. And then they took off, and the truck takes off right after him. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like it was just another opportunity that I had, and it got messed up by another human. So that was pretty frustrating. And then of course, I checked for blood. I actually saw where he went up into bed, and he wasn't limping or anything. And I'm like, I knew I had a clean miss. And that was pretty much it for muzzleloader, man. And then a week and a half later goes by. I had gone out there a few times trying to find him, and I couldn't find him. Couldn't find him. I'm like, oh my gosh, someone else shot him, or maybe I did hit him and I didn't look hard enough for blood. Like, did I screw up? Like everything goes through your mind, especially
Mm-hmm.
when you're an overthinker, you know. And finally, rifle hunt got it done, and that was on it started. The opening day was Saturday, and I got my father-in-law his buck. There's a tall 3-point that was running with this buck, and I was like, "Hey David, I got a buck you can shoot if you want to come down here and shoot it," because he had a tag down here too, and he wanted to hunt with me. And so we ended up getting him that buck, which there's a YouTube video on there as well, which is a pretty cool story. And
I'll
he
plug
got
that in the description, your channel, so they can watch them all.
awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate
Yep.
it. Yeah. And so he got that buck, and then when we when he shot his buck Saturday night, and so we had to leave it overnight because we didn't see him die. We saw him bedded, but he wasn't expired. So we were like, well, let's not push him. We don't want to jump him, so let's back out. And that night it snowed pretty good, like 6 inches or so. And we ended up going back and finding him. But before we found him, David and I split up, and I hear David say, "There's the buck." And he's all like pumped up, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And he's got his rifle, and nothing happens, you know. So I'm like, I didn't hear a shot, so I run down to him, and he's like, it wasn't my buck. I saw a big buck. It was a huge buck. I think it was huge. I think it was Tank." And I'm like, "Whoa, slow down, slow down. Did you see Tank?" Because I haven't seen him for a week and a half, and
Mm.
I'm thinking he's dead
So he
or I
jumped
wounded
it.
him. Huh?
So he jumped it from
Yeah,
his
he
bed.
jumped him out of his bed. Yeah, and I'm like, "You're positive that was him?" He's like, "Oh, I just bumped Tank. He's still here." I'm like, so that gave me a lot of hope, and so we ended up getting David's buck out of there, and then so that was Sunday. So then Monday went out, didn't see Tank, but I saw the other buck. We called so the buck that David shot, we called him Ren, just a tall 3x3. Then we called the buck that he was always with. He was always doubled up with another like 3x4, kind of funky looking. We called him Stimpy, like the old cartoon show, Ren
Mhm.
and Stimpy. I don't know if it was on Adult Swim or not, but it was an old, kind of an inappropriate like cartoon type thing called Ren and Stimpy. And so we called those bucks that, and this was Tank. But Ren and Stimpy were always together. And I saw Stimpy, and I'm like, okay, well Stimpy's still here. Tank's got to be here with him somewhere. And then Tuesday morning, it unfolds on that YouTube video. And if anybody wants to watch that, they can see the rest of the story. But it was quite the year, man, with that buck.
So what month is that for rifle season for you guys? Because there's snow, so
It,
what it must be like a little bit later.
October.
October, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, what I was gonna ask is when do you see, I know mature bucks, they tend to like in the rut and other things for like whitetails and sometimes mule deer, they like to be alone. They like to be isolated from a lot of other big bucks. Once they leave their bachelor group, like when do you see that they leave other bucks, or do they even leave the other big bucks, or do they just stay together?
So the rut normally starts after, for here anyways, and in my experience, the rut normally seems to start after the rifle hunt, and it's
Same
normally like
same
a
for
week
us
or
in
two.
Idaho.
Yeah, so I haven't really, and I would love to, but like having a family and stuff, I can't be out there like all the time, you know. And so during the rut, I can't really answer that honestly. Like normally, like sometimes in a rifle, like if it's cold, you're like, man, maybe we'll get a little rut action. Maybe it'll kind of kickstart it, you know. And sometimes you'll see a buck chasing a doe a little bit, but there's always a, like if they're running with that. What's crazy is that normally bachelor groups are in the summer when they have their velvet on. Then once they rub that velvet off, they're kind of doing their own thing and
Yeah.
getting pushing other bucks away. But this group that I was hunting, they were together the whole time. There was three. So at the beginning there was 14 that were all pretty close. So then about 2 miles down the road, there was like another like 15 bucks that was in a different group. But there was nothing in there in that group that I wanted to hunt to
Yeah.
pursue. But sometimes they would mix and match. A couple bucks would be from this group over with this group. I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like they're kind of mixing groups, even though they're about a mile and a half apart. But once they all rubbed their velvet off, it was only like the original bucks that they kind of had like little pairs. Like, oh, these three were always together, then these two were always together. Like they definitely simplified their group, but they were still kind of paired up. And then even all the way to the rifle hunt, I mean, Tank, Stimpy, and Ren were all still together.
Interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting how in hunting seasons, like mule deer will often stay in somewhat of the same range within a couple miles and like in a place where they feel comfortable, but then how
Mhm.
much they move for their winter range, like whitetail hunters and other people don't really understand, at least out here on the East Coast. Like my buddy had a trail camera photo of the exact same buck that I have, and they had collar GPS things on a couple of them. And one of the bucks I found his shed, this buck I have 2 years off of, so he's 206 inches this year. It's probably gonna lag a little
Holy
bit.
cow.
So he's got a 7-inch cheater on his other side for this. He's got 5.5-inch mass measurement all the way up until right here. You can see how thick it is. And then this is
Jeez.
his 2 years before. This is his side. So that's what he grew in 2 years.
Oh wow.
But
Yeah.
they fit
Dang.
right inside of each other. They were 100 yards apart. This buck comes all the way from Wyoming to Idaho to winter. It's about
Are you serious?
36 miles or something. I mean, Popeye, you've probably heard of Popeye, the Wyoming mule
Hmm.
deer. So
Oh yeah.
he traveled like 45 miles from his summer to
Hmm.
winter range. It's just crazy and how incredible like these bucks move. I don't know much about these ones, but I'll show you that this is one of my favorite bucks. I mean, the burrs on this thing are sharp enough they cut the rope I tried to hang him up with.
Dude, that's a
It's
stud.
a bottle cap, and he's got this for a cheater. He's a cool thick one, and then this one is a 186 buck probably,
Wow.
and he's got this big old cheater.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so
And these are sheds that you found?
yeah, these are all sheds I've found.
Dude, how did talk about an adrenaline rush? I bet you're stoked.
I uh I lost my mind. I have a video of the 200-inch one that I found, and I don't know. I think the other side got poached because
Oh,
the
really?
200-inch one, the reason I found it and it's so dark is because I found it on private land.
Uh-huh.
So that hillside gets absolutely obliterated by poachers and like I mean some of the people I mean I see boot tracks on it all the time before it's not supposed to be open and closed and stuff, but this buck, someone I might buy the other side from a guy. This is the biggest fork horn I think you'll ever see. Like it is, you can see it compared to my head.
Dude, that's insane.
He's just terrible genetics, but he's palmated right here. 17 and a half to 18-inch G2 for a two
Holy
point.
cow.
He's
Dude,
just
if
super cool.
you had a tag, how would you not want to shoot that thing?
No, I know. And the sad thing is a lot of these bucks come from super far away, but since I've had back issues and stuff, I haven't been able to hunt them, but this is the widest gap buck I've found. I mean,
Oh wow.
he's just he doesn't have much for forks. His forks are really weak, his back fork's weak, his front fork's weak, but he's just a very wide buck and then really thick right here.
Yeah, dude, he's neat.
But those are some pretty cool ones.
Good.
So you didn't hunt for like 10 years when you moved to Utah, and then you started to hunt again.
Yeah, so after I shot that buck in New Mexico, I had always wanted to get back into it. I still did predator calling, but I just never had the money to where I could like, oh yeah, I'm gonna spend this money on a deer tag and then spend money on gas and then my bullets and camo and stuff. Like I had to prioritize, food and shelter and like rent and stuff.
Important things.
Yeah, important things, right? And so when I moved to Utah, still, it took me till I think I started working out at my current job when I was 23. And dang, that's crazy. Wow. It's crazy to go back to the past and think about how long you've
Reflection.
lived somewhere. Yeah, reflection. Yeah. And I think in 2018, I finally drew a tag. And so it was from however old, whatever year that was, when I was 13 or 14. I graduated in 11. So I had to have been like 2008 or nine when I shot my first buck and only buck all the way until 2018, I think. And I finally got a tag, and I got into spike hunting because here in Utah you can get a spike elk tag over the counter, and that I actually got that in 2017, I think, and that really got me back into hunting. I was like, oh man, I got my first elk. I was out with my dad making memories. Like this is what I grew up doing and haven't done for so long, and now I know why I love it so much. And dude, it's hunting is so much more than just killing an animal. Like it's
100%.
I'm sure you understand. Like it teaches you so much mental toughness and how to not quit with like I remember being a kid and being like, oh, I want to go coyote climbing so bad, but my dad just wants to hike as far as he can to the furthest bush to sit down and call coyotes. And I hated hiking. And just whenever, even when I was older, like whenever I first started getting back into hunting in Utah when I was it 2017 when I got that spike tag, I'm like, man, hiking, I forgot how tough hiking is, especially up here because it's a lot of high country where we were going for these elk. And I'm like, man, I gotta get into shape. And I had started working out a little before that, like bodybuilding type stuff. Wasn't really into cardio and stuff. But just it's one of those things. Like the more you do it, the better you get at it. And I love hiking, man. I could just and that's the thing about hunting is that you get to your ridge, you're like, man, nothing here. Well, guess what? You got to hike to the next one to see if that's where the deer or if that's where the elk are at. So it teaches you a lot about, just pushing yourself and setting goals. And yeah, I think I went off on a tantrum there, but yeah. So I didn't hunt shoot my first deer again after that big gap until I was in 2018. So
That's cool,
yeah.
just telling your story. Like, so one question I had before we continue with, I'm curious, like how you started filming or why you started like your channel. But before that, what do you think is the biggest mistake that mule deer hunters make in Utah? If you had to give them a tip.
So the biggest mistake I think, unless you're like one of the, unless you're consistently getting mule deer and you're getting your target bucks, and if you're like your average mule deer hunter, I would say the biggest issue that they might have for not being successful would be that they're not patient and they're not willing to put in the work and they're not willing to suffer a little bit. Like
Or
they're
get out of the car.
or get out of the car, yeah. And you know what's funny? Road hunting does work. I don't really do it, but like the time I shot my buck in 21 on the way back from glassing for my buck, we were heading back to the house and like, holy crap, a bunch of deer just crossed the road. So me and my dad get out. I'm like, there's a buck. And so I had a cardboard box in the back of my truck and I throw it off the side of the road to the legal regulations that it has to be 16 yards or something like that. I throw it way out there and I'm like, Dad, he's like, what'd you throw the box for? I'm like, use it as a gun rest. And so he gets on the box and he's looking for the buck. He's like, where's the buck? My dad was 68 at the time. And he's an amazing human. And he's out there and he can hike with me. He's in some shed hunting videos, dude. He's diabetic, 68, 69 now. And he's just a real strong, he's someone I look up to, man. And a man I look up to. So anyways, we ended up getting that buck off of, road hunting unintentionally. So it happens. But I would say most of the time you're not lucky, especially if you're trying to get a big buck, you're not going to be that lucky person that just, oh, there's a big buck. Let's shoot it off the side of the road,
And
There's
if
a
you
lot of
are,
times,
it's not going to happen more than once usually.
exactly. Yeah. But there's exactly. And there's a lot of times where you're out there and guys they'll sit there and like, okay, the bucks like to come out at right before dark, and then it starts snowing or it gets cold and they're like, well, there's only 10 minutes of light, legal shooting light left. Let's use this light to get back to the truck without having to use flashlights. Well, as soon as they leave, that's when the big bucks come out, and like I'm a victim of that. Like whenever I shot my buck in 21, I've been same thing. I was a dedicated hunter, so I hunted all during the archery. I shot over his back once. I couldn't find him during the muzzleloader, so I gave up on him and left. And then I came back during the spike hunt, which is like it was a couple days before the rifle deer hunt started. And I see this buck walk out far away, and I'm like, that's where wide load. I called him wide load. I'm like, that's where me and my buddies, they were calling him wide load because they're the ones that turned me on to this buck. I wasn't the one that found this buck. That's a pretty cool story too. And so I'm like, oh, there's wide load. I think that's him. I haven't like, oh my gosh, the rifle hunt starts in a few days, and so we were able to get in on him. And it was during the first day of the rifle hunt. I'm like, Dad shot his in the morning, and so we went out back in the evening, and I'm like, it started to hail on us, and we were soaking wet. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just use the last 8 minutes of light to get back to the truck. I was thinking that in my head, and I was like, oh, I just got to keep glassing until it's dark. And then as soon as I had that thought of leaving, I swear I was glassing this tree line, and boom, I see him and two other bucks just run like they were like trying to get to that grass and the shrub fast. They ran out of the tree line and they start eating right away. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I ended up shooting him at like, I think it was like 400 yards, 380 yards. And he ran 40 yards and piled over. But if I would have left and let that little inner baby, for lack of a better term, if I would have let that fear or that I don't know what I want to cuss, but I'm not going to cuss, but I wanted to let that
You can do whatever you want.
I want to let that inner bitch voice, talk and be like, let's just go back to the truck. Let's go home and get warm. But if I did, I wouldn't have got him. And same with Tank, dude. If I didn't know that because there are so many times hunting him, I wanted to give up and go to a different area because I'm like, I haven't seen him for 4 days or I haven't seen him for a week and a half. But the times that I stayed until it was pitch black, I would sit there in glass. I'm like, I know I can't shoot because I can barely see. It's past legal shooting light. But if I stay here in glass a little bit, or even use my phone scope and have my phone scope on there, and you can kind of see through your phone a little bit brighter than you can in real life, right? So I would sit
100%.
there and do that too. And then I would see a big body step out of the trees. I'm like, I can't see his antlers, but that's a big body dude. That's got to be Tank. So I would tell myself, he's still here. Don't leave the area. Don't give up on showing back to the same spot over and over again. And that's what kept me coming back. So I'm like, I know he's here. I didn't give up, you know. So a lot of guys, if they're hunting a target buck, they give up and they move, change areas, which is what I was going to do because you hear as
Yeah.
it gets colder, deer start to move to their winter range. But I kept telling myself, I'm like, you know what, where I'm hunting is kind of winter range already. It's kind of deserty. It's not like I'm up in the high country. So yeah, I think to answer your question, what's a big thing that hunters do that make them unsuccessful is they give up, they're not patient, and they get in their heads too much.
Yeah, I think hunting, you make a good point there. I think hunting, a lot of it is a mental game. I think 60% of it is, I think a lot of people enjoy watching than like videos and even some people like shed hunting more than hunting, which I find, I don't know. Like shed hunting, yes, like it's kind of ruined me hunting because like I've only hunted mule deer for one year and I like saw all these bucks that were like would be considered like good meat bucks or like a small basket rack 4x4. And I
Yeah,
was like, no, I'm not shooting anything bigger than like my biggest whitetail. Or like I'm
yeah,
not shooting anything big because I had all these big mule deer sheds. And then I'm like, man, shed hunting's ruined me because like I'm
yeah.
seeing these giant antlers and I'm like, now I want to hold something big. So I mean,
Mhm.
but with me, I'm limited because like I could only hunt from a four-wheeler because of the fact that I can't hike until I'm recovered and stuff.
Yeah,
Um, if I recover, well, that's a whole nother story with my back issues combined with that. They think it's correlated. So, anyways, but it's interesting how we learn over time. Like if you put in the effort, if you get over the next hill, if you tell yourself, I need to scout 60% of the time, hunt 40% of the time, just get yourself off the couch out there and put
hmm,
yourself in those high value areas where you think, hey, if there's a chance he's going to come out, I'm going to stick it out. What I think to myself, if I'm in a tree stand or stalking, whatever the case may be, you're out here, you might as well wait the extra time. I mean, I got a deer 3 to 4 miles into a swamp, and you can't pack out deer in the East Coast where I live.
really,
You have to drag them whole. So I've been in swamps and stuff where you're basically deer do float because of their fur and stuff, but you're dragging them through muck where you're up to like your waist almost, just falling through trying to drag these deer. So it's just different. But
yeah,
I've that deer specifically, it came out right when I was about to get down. Like I was about to get down out of my tree and I didn't see anything. And then you hear, tss, 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 and I'm like, holy crap, there it is. And then I pull back my bow. Like all these are bow bucks, but
awesome.
it's been cool to see like how just waiting that extra second because like you said your dad hunted and like coyote hunted and then you took a huge break like I didn't grow up hunting like my dad loves guns and stuff but none of my
Mhm.
family hunts. Both of my parents are from England, so like
Oh wow,
hunting's not something in their background.
yeah,
Besides my uncle in England, he's a huge fisherman. That's probably the closest thing to the outdoors in my family name. But I
wow,
I've been super blessed to be in a place where it's really hard hunting, but it's made me a better hunter for
that's
sure.
awesome, man. That's way cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool history that you're like the first hunter of your family,
Yeah. And
and you're diving
hopefully I
all in.
have
You're all in
son,
it too.
hopefully I have a son and then his son hunts and just
Yeah,
kind of carry it on because I feel like a lot of people have like a father or a grandpa or an uncle figure in their
hmm,
life. And I have a little niece and she's like 3 years old and like my sister-in-law was like, I don't know if she should see like the deer on the wall because it's just a different culture. So she's just
yeah,
like, I don't know. She's from Arizona and kind of like a city girl or whatever. And I was like, hopefully they don't freak out. The little nieces come in, they want to touch the deer. They're like all excited. She grabs two sheds like this from the same buck, and I was like, "Can you rattle in the buck?" And she goes like this instinctively. I had never taught her or
Oh
anything,
wow,
and I have it all on
that's awesome.
video. And
That's sick.
she starts rattling, and then she takes the two pedicles, puts them together like this perfectly. I'm like, whose kid is this? Like, and
She's a
I don't know.
natural.
I was like, I don't know why I felt joy from that, but that was like
Mhm.
something so cool to me where I'm like, you see like Yellowstone or like maybe like the Western thing, like family oriented, like out there, kids
Yeah.
are working hard on a farm,
Hmm.
running cattle or whatever the case may be. And I was just like, she hasn't really had any of those experiences, but just that little thing, I was like, that's so cool that she was
Dude.
able to just see that for a second.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And like you said, that we could talk for a while about that, about how like the whole family type thing, like that, whether you're a farming community or farming family, or you ranch, or you even just have like a small like homestead type thing with chickens and goats and a couple of horses or whatever. Like a lot of these kids these days, especially city kids, don't have that, and so they don't really have that like that what's that called? I don't know,
Perspective
companionship,
or companionship, yeah.
perspective, I guess, companionship with your family, where it's like, hey, kids, it's time to get up and do chores. Let's help each other out. Like, don't back talk. Let's get through this. Like, I grew up, we had dude, I got my first paycheck, I think, when I was 8 or 9 years old. It was like, I think it's $75 a day for a day hand working cows. And so me and my best friend, because they had a ranch, and they were also, his dad was a foreman for their neighboring ranch. And so we got to do a lot of cowboy work growing up.
Hmm.
And man, some days you didn't want to do it, and some days you didn't want to go build fence. But you know what? Now I am who I am today because of what I went through as a kid. And these kids nowadays, like that grow up on these tablets and all
Yep.
like, oh, I don't know if I want my kid looking at your deer type of situations, or like I don't know if I want your like my son, like we went and butchered a pig because we went in on a couple pigs with my parents because we wanted our own meat. We don't like to like like the meat you get from the store is so processed and it's pumped full
Hmm.
of stuff. And so we wanted that's why we love to hunt, because we love the elk meat. My wife's not
Tastes
the biggest fan
amazing.
of deer meat, which is fine. I'll eat the deer meat. And we love to have our own pork, and so we did our own pork and stuff. And my son, um, we went out there, and so when I met my wife, it was 3 years, it was in 2020. I had just got divorced, and for my first wife. And my life, as soon as I finally agreed for that divorce, my life went like things were so, it was like never a good situation, but sometimes it's for the better. And
Yeah.
so I met my wife during the whole COVID thing, and we ended up clicking really good, and just everything was like yeah, it was awesome. And so she has a son, Asher, and I'm raising him as my own. And he's all about wanting to go hunting, and he's
That's
like, "Can I
awesome.
work out with you?" And it's funny because we have so much in common, even though we're not related at all. I'm like I don't even like I couldn't ask for a better son. And because we think alike too, we're both like rule followers. And my wife's like earlier today, she's like, go get some napkins from the gas station. I'm like, I'm not gonna go in there and steal napkins without purchasing anything. They're gonna be like looking at me all weird. I'm like, she's like, babe, you're such a rule follower. I'm like, do you want a water? So she ended up going there and she ended up buying a Gatorade. Like that's how Asher thinks. Asher's like, I'm not gonna do that. What if I get in trouble? Like, so it's just really funny. But
Interesting.
yeah, seeing him. So we went
I'm
and
sure you've rubbed off on him.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, but he's just a dang good kid, man. And so we went and we butchered this pig, and I'm like, Asher, I want you to come help us. That way, he's around it. Whenever I shot my buck tank, I wanted him to be around it as much as he could. In my buck wide load, I wanted him to be around there through the process. I didn't want to force him. Like I wanted him to
Yeah.
kind of be there. Then say, hey, Dad, can I go? I'm not going to force him. So I was like, yeah, son, I just wanted you to see it, check it out. But same with the pig. I'm like, hey, we're gonna butcher this pig, and he's like, well, I don't want to see you shoot it, but can I come back after you shoot it? I'm like, yeah, that's totally fine, buddy. So we shot it, and then he comes running around the corner. He's like, whoa, and the pig's dead. And so we drag it up, and we hang it up, we start processing it, and he's like asking questions, and he's all a big part of it. Um, and then later on, my mother-in-law was like talking to my wife, and she's like, did Asher watch them do that pig? She's like, oh, my poor Asher, I didn't want him to have to watch that and stuff. And then
Hmm.
my wife's like, Mom, do you want Asher to be a man, or do you want him to grow up
Oof.
like some like city slicker that's scared of blood and scared to eat meat? Like, and so her mom was like, oh, it's yeah, I guess that's a good point. I just, how grandparents are with their grandchildren. They want to protect them and coddle them, and which is what grandparents are supposed to do.
Yeah.
But it's nice also having a partner like my wife that's like, no, Asher, this is good for Asher. Asher's gonna grow up being able to provide for his family. He's gonna be a man. He's gonna know how to protect. He's gonna know how to do all this stuff, and he's not gonna be one of those kids that just sit on their tablet and stuff. And so that was pretty cool. I think kids. That's what's so cool about hunting is that kids. It can be a family thing, and like yeah, hunting this buck. What's cool about Tank is that Asher was a part of it. I was like, Asher, let's do a YouTube video. You want to be in the YouTube video? Let's make memories. And so Asher, he has all these memories to look back on, and he can look at me and be like, hey, like my stepdad really made sure I was involved. He really made sure that I was a part of these important memories, and he didn't have to take me, and I don't have to take him. And like whenever it was time for hunting Tank, I obviously didn't take my son because he was only 8 years old. And I'm like, son, like I'm gonna have to run to these spots. And so he understood, but I tried to make it a priority to get him somewhat involved. That way he could have those memories.
Yeah, I think just involving them to like this. I'm not like a father or anything. I'm a young guy, but
Yeah.
I think it's important to like there's a non like forcing thing, like you said, like that factor plays
Hmm.
into it. I think if they want to do it, that just makes it better. But just giving them that opportunity to be able to choose.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting how times have changed, but also there's part of that generation where they will grow up the same way. I think it's just based on their environment, and
Hmm.
hopefully we can have some reflection of that. But I agree with you also about the memories because that's why I originally started filming was my parents would never believe me if I say, "Hey, I saw a big buck." I knew they wouldn't believe me. That
Yeah.
was the first reason I wanted to film. Second, I had like a lot of inspirations of why I wanted to. And third, I can show my kids. I can remember it myself. A photo in a video is worth 100 times more, like to me, if I can see the deer alive. I think that gives them more respect if I could film them and be able to
Hmm.
like have that history with them than if
Yeah.
I'm just to go shoot a deer. I think it's cool to hold the antlers and the meat is gone, so the antlers are really the only thing you have left. So I
Hmm.
think the memory that you can like share with other people, share your passion, I think is extremely important. Lastly, I just wanted to ask you like what got you into wanting filming yourself?
So growing up, like I said, my dad, he would get these videos from the Drury brothers, those
Hmm.
whitetail hunters, and
Yep.
he would get those cassette, like the VHS videos sent in. And so me and him would actually sit there and watch those all the time. And we didn't have whitetail. We just had mule deer, but we still, that's all there really was to watch. We didn't have YouTube, and so we just watched a lot of whitetails getting hunted out of tree stands, out of fields and stuff. That's the kind of hunting we could do, but it was something we could do together, and it was just fun to watch. And every now and then they might throw a mule deer hunt or a turkey hunt in there,
Yeah.
so that was a lot of fun. And so growing up watching that and having like thinking how cool that would be to record ourselves hunting and stuff. And then whenever going through my divorce, I think the year, so I was in a marriage for 7 years, 6 years together for seven. Like I said, I was homeschooled until ninth grade, went to high
Oh, that's
school.
why you're weird. No, I'm just kidding.
That exactly.
I'm
That's
just
exactly.
kidding.
Uh, my
No,
teacher said I was a
I'm
good
just
student.
teasing.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I was homeschooled to ninth grade, and culture shock for sure in high school. And when I graduated, I was also raised a Jehovah's Witness, so I was super sheltered, like super religious, super sheltered. And I basically like fell in love with the first girl I'd ever stayed the night with, and she ended up being a lady from California, and had a really. I won't get too into it, but we just she was super liberal, I was super conservative type thing, and I basically spent 7 years of my life trying to make someone else happy and taking away my happiness and things that I love doing. And finally, I got to the point to where I'm like, all right, you asked for the like thousandth divorce. I'm finally going to give up because I always wanted to keep going until I knew I couldn't do any better or like
Didn't
make
want
her
to just
happier.
give up.
Yeah, and so I did. I tried as hard as I could, and I finally one day I was out shed hunting, and she called, and I was like, all right, yeah, all right, I agree, let's do it. I don't know what else to do to make you happy. I've done everything I can, and I'm all right, let's do it. Boom. But then an hour and a half later, I walked up on that side by side set, that elk shed sitting up there, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a sign. Like how like and I had never found an elk set either because I didn't even shed hunt until um like I think 18, 2017 or 2018. And so because in New Mexico, we didn't have elk. Where I lived, we just had mule deer and it was this desert and desert. And my dad never even knew shed hunting was a thing. And then
Mm,
Utah, of course, there's, like Tines Up just over the mountain from us. They live just over in Richfield from us. And so Tines Up made it really popular and it got really popular. And I'm probably one of those guys that like, wow, this is a cool thing. And I'm one of those guys that these old OG shed hunters probably don't like because I didn't get into it until I was in my 20s already.
yeah.
And but it's just something I fell in love with, man. I was outdoors and like I love hunting. I'm like, well, I want to go shed. I want to go find some elk sheds. Heck yeah. And so after she finally asked for that divorce, and I was like, okay, let's do it. Hour and a half later, walked up on that set back there, and I'm like, you know what? It was a sign. And from that moment on, dude, I just boom. And so from that moment on, I was doing like Snap or Instagram videos of me like out hunting and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, like it'd be so cool to have memories of me and my dad or me and my buddies on YouTube. That way I can have as like a diary and like remember all these hunts because I'm like, I don't even have a picture when I shot my first mule deer in New Mexico. I don't have a picture of me and my dad shooting that
Mm,
buck. And I'm like, that would have been awesome. And so I'm like, if I'm already out there hunting, why not record myself? Especially if it's so easy on a cell phone. Like I was like, you know what? I'll use my cell phone and just start recording. And people on Instagram started telling me, they're like, hey, why don't you start a YouTube? Like you seem like you're pretty good at talking to the camera and like you love what you're doing. So make a YouTube. And I'm like, you know what? Even if nothing comes from it, if I can inspire one person or if I could just have these memories with my family and friends to look back on when I'm 80 something years old or 100 and I'm sitting in my chair dying, like, and like, I don't know, man. It's just so
if the
basically,
world's still around by then.
yeah, exactly. If the world's still around. So I started wanting to film myself just because of memories. And I just, once you start editing, like editing actually is fun. It's like, so I like to write music and play music. And so whenever you're playing music, you're making art, right? You're creating something. And just like with editing, you're creating a story and you're like, I don't want this clip here. I want this later. I want to do a voiceover here. I want to add music here. You're trying to draw the audience into you, which is what you want to do with your music. You want to draw people into your music and you want to please the audience. So that's really what got me into it, creating memories. And if something else comes of it, then that's even better.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like I know I'm never gonna get huge or whatever, but
Hey, you can't say that, man. You can't say
okay,
you
sorry,
don't know
sorry,
that.
sorry. I don't know, but based on my looks, I'm not good enough for the camera. No, I'm just kidding. But
No.
I I don't know. I don't care. I'm just doing this. One of the reasons why I started with it is so I can network with people like you or the
Hmm.
Drurys or other people that I know that are kind of bigger names, just so I can be able to do more of what I love, have more opportunities so I can travel. I mean, I made my first hunting buddy. We're still best friends to this day. He's maybe like 7 years older than me,
Hmm.
and I met him by selling a hunting blind on Craigslist. Or, and then my other buddy, we became friends selling something on Facebook Marketplace. Now we're best buddies. We stay at each other's places, like apartments or whatever.
Yeah.
Like we'll hunt together all the time, shed hunt together, like whatever it is, we'll do it together. And I just think that's cool that we can have like certain things in our life, whether it's hunting, fishing, sports, that can mesh people together. Because I know there's a lot of hate also in the hunting industry. I'm sure you see that from keyboard warriors or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of
Hmm.
people out there that will doubt what you do, and I've even had it myself. I'm like, I wonder if that buck was poached, or oh, I wonder if this does it ethically. And that's my fault for judging in that standpoint because I've had bad experiences with that. I've had a buck
Hmm.
that would have been the biggest deer of my life under my tree stand 15 minutes before shooting light, and I could have shot it and it would have been a giant buck. And then I figured out later it was poached, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like,
Uh,
and it's
yeah.
just like yes, ethically you want to do the right thing, but part of me was like, oh, maybe I should have done it. But you can't think like that. You just have
Yeah.
to do the right thing and learn from
Hmm.
learn from the past and just try to be better and put more time in, like you said, be more devoted. I'm not recommending to the viewers that you should just get divorced so you can hunt more. That I don't think that's what me and Dan are
Uh,
saying, but in
yeah,
his
definitely not.
circumstance, it worked out, and now you have an amazing family, and I'm sure your kids are amazing, and the baby's a
Hmm.
blessing in your life. So that's awesome that
Yeah.
you're fulfilling your passion. And I'll leave all of his information in the description. And is there anything else you'd like to say before closing?
Yeah, I agree. Don't get divorced so you can go hunting more. Like that's not why it happened. It was 7 years of never being able to please somebody else, and which basically means you're just not meant for each other if you're having to do that. Marriage is work, but sometimes if it's too much work and it gets too depressing or whatnot on either end, it's just not right. So not trying to end this on a bad note, but yeah, there is light at the end of the tunnel. I am super happy, and I am with someone that loves me for who I am, and I love her for who she is and what she brings to the table. And yeah, that's life's awesome right now. So yeah, don't get divorced just to do what you love. Make sure there are other ways around that, communicate.
Awesome. Well, if you ever need anything, if you ever want to be back on, we'd love to have you. I really appreciate the time you take to do this. I know that you coach your son's basketball team and you're doing a bunch of stuff and working a ton, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man. It was an honor. Appreciate it.
What did that buck score again? I forgot, just so I can put it in the description.
So he ended up scoring 175.
175 tank. I was gonna guess
175.
1878 was my guess. No way.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody actually hit me up and said, "Hey, my wife found a shed from him." So I got one shed. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, he ended up going 175. Everybody that sees him is like, wow, he looks way bigger than 175.
No, his frame's huge.
Yeah, and he's weird too. See how from the side his fronts curl in?
He's tight, yeah.
Yeah, super tight. But yeah.
So it's just that front fork kind of subtract. Score, I think sometimes a buck can score more, but it doesn't look as cool as that. So I don't, whatever.
Yeah, that's why I say because you can get a big buck, put a tape on it, and be like, oh, that's kind of depressing. That's why score for me right now is like, you know what? If it gets you happy and it's better than what you did last year, and that was your goal, then awesome.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to do is just get bigger and bigger every year, and I've been able to do that. So I'm just gonna keep trying to get bigger and bigger, and hopefully fulfill more of our goals. But appreciate you having us on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, man. We'll be in touch. Have a good one, Kyle.
See ya.
See ya.
That ends another podcast for Bows, Bros, and Bucks. Thanks for watching. Unless you leave, and don't tell